back to the second episode of Seeking the Truth, JFK Assassination. And if you watched episode one, we kind of just dipped our toes in it. We talked about the Oliver Stone movie, what we got out of it, what we felt like, what Oliver Stone was trying to portray and things like that. Now, in this episode, we're going to dive into, I guess, sort of the timeline of JFK. And, when he was in office, certain things he did that maybe would upset certain people and maybe started to turn the wheels into what ultimately happened on that day, November 22nd, 1963. So we're just going to kind of, start about, basically when he took office, there was 8 years of Eisenhower and it was kind of business as usual. We had the Korean War, but obviously it wasn't what we had come out of World War II, which was was the Great War. And it was just sort of business as usual. Kennedy gets into office and there's sort of, a changing of the guard. There's different plans, like signing his, I think there was a lot of blowback of him making his brother the Attorney General.
Right.
And obviously Bobby was very ambitious, probably more ambitious than his brother, started to go after the mafia.
Yes.
And
you don't mess with them, man, I'm telling you.
So obviously the big one was going after Jimmy Hoffa because the mafia was heavily involved with the Teamsters and, messing with the pension fund. That's where a lot of, or the organized crime came from, and, a lot of their finances came from.
Yeah.
So they, so that could upset some people, and then you throw it, he, had a lot of stuff going on. You talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. He wanted to begin negotiations with Russia to sort of end the Cold War. And he went into his first meeting, and you're going to have to forgive me for the name, but the president or prime minister, whatever they call it over there, basically intimidated and bullied Kennedy. Kennedy walked out. He was not happy at all. And then Kennedy made a mistake, if I'm not mistaken, saying something, kind of making an attack towards him. So tension started to elevate, and boom, they send missiles, or they want to send missiles to Cuba. And
from what I understand, it was, obviously a very scary time. We've lived through and are living through our own crises right now, obviously, but to have fire drills sound in schools, and people have to hide under
preparing for a nuclear war. I mean, that had to have been the tensest time, as close as you could have been to nuclear war, that they're sending nuclear missiles to Cuba, so it's short distance of fire. Because, I mean, it was a counter to what we did. We put missiles in, I think it was Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, which is a stone's throw away from Russia. So it was a retaliation. And, I don't remember exactly. I just know that there was a standstill, and they finally, decided to turn around and come back. But again, it's, all this stuff is going on. And
would that, I guess people would interpret that he was lenient on communism?
I know a lot of people said he was soft on foreign policy. Okay. And obviously, again, you have people talking, behind his back. Then you have the whole, which probably was one of the biggest debacles ever, was the Bay of Pigs, isn't it?
Right.
The Bay of Pigs was obviously we're supposed to go in there and throw Fidel Castro out of power.
Yep.
And it was very poorly planned. It didn't really execute. And I give Kennedy a lot of credit for taking the blame in the public. Privately, he was upset with the CIA, the FBI, feeling like they gave him false information, basically setting him up to fail. And so there's a lot of turmoil at this part. And then he excuses, was it Alan Dulles, I believe it is, and I forget the other one, but excuses them. And these guys are sacred cows of intel. They've been heavily in the cabinet or, involved in White House, Washington's operations for years.
I mean, the way I see it is, if you're someone in and I'm just saying politics in general. I'm not specific, but if you're in that kind of position of power, your cabinet, the people surrounding you have to be supportive of you. If you have elements working against you, who are your closest to you, then of course there's going to be conflict and dissension, and maybe even more than just harsh feelings.
It scares me to think, and I know we're not talking about who was great presidents, who was not. Obviously Kennedy ran against Nixon, and we all know Nixon was president later. It scares me to think what would happen if Nixon was in office with the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Right.
and not really the Bay of Pigs. That would have, probably ended badly for anybody. But, Kennedy kept a calm head because he knew if we start launching nuclear missiles, not only are we going to pay for it, our kids and our grandkids and our grandkids' grandkids, they're going to be paying for this because we're going to, damage the earth. I don't know if Nixon would have had such a level head. Blow up the bastards, But no. But anyway, so obviously, again, his brand of thinking is not going with the status quo that Washington normally goes with. And again, I'm not pointing fingers as to what happened. I'm just saying what was going on during his presidency that probably people were upset about. And I know that, and you got to give Kennedy credit too as far as pushing the Civil Rights Bill.
Right.
And there were, they've been trying to do that forever. But most presidents would bring it up, it would get shot down, and they would just move on. They wouldn't fight for it.
Yeah, it was so deeply entrenched, like you said, in the South and all that.
Man.
And the mindset was so, in their minds, it was unalterable that this man comes along and wants to change things for the better.
And they want to be set in their ways. It's odd. It's almost like the Democrats were the conservatives and the Republicans were, had a little more liberal thinking.
Right.
It's weird how things have flipped because, the South was heavily Democrat. Now the South is heavily Republican. But back then, and there was a senator from, I believe it was Georgia, that was, I think he was a Senate majority leader too. He had a lot of senators in his pocket. So anytime a civil rights bill would come, he would get his whole gang of senators and just vote against it every time. And sadly, Kennedy wasn't around long enough to see the bill come to fruition. And that's why, and I'm sure we'll do a video talking about LBJ, but that's why I give LBJ a lot of credit. The more that I've researched him and the more that I respect the man, I know a lot of people point the fingers that LBJ was probably in on it. I just don't, it's hard to see that, especially because he took that civil rights bill that Kennedy wanted to, pass into law, and he fought to get it passed. He said, Kennedy gave us hope. I'm going to give the results.
Right. So,
but again, you're talking again about change, different thinking of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get to, Vietnam, which was a whole other thing. He goes in there because, again, he's trying to stop communism, and he feels like if he allows South Vietnam to fall to the Viet Cong, it's basically going to seal that he's not going to get reelected because he's like, I look weak with Russia. I look weak with the Bay of Pigs. I can't allow this to happen in Vietnam. There's a lot of conflicting stories. Most historians think that he was going to eventually pull out of Vietnam because he noticed that the people didn't want us there,
Which again would have probably put him in a bad position as far as foreign policy. Would have
exactly, and that's what everybody thinks that foreign policy is weak. At that time, domestically, the biggest thing going on was civil rights, and he took that head on, yes. But the country was, as the country is, I think now in a lot of instances, it was divided on that. But as far as foreign policy, I think a lot of people saw foreign policy the same way. They didn't want to look weak to Russia. They didn't want to look weak to,
right.
To the communism. They didn't want to see communism spread. So they, he's like, I got to go in there and I got to stop it. I personally think he probably would have pulled out if he had won another term because he had said, he said, if the people don't want our help, then we can't help them. we'll never know.
Right.
But no, it's just interesting when you start peeling back some of these layers, what was going on in his presidency. And, and it's all there. Like I said, people were upset that, he made Bobby his attorney general. But when he got there, he felt like he didn't have anybody he could trust. He asked LBJ to be his vice president because obviously he was from the South and he could get Texas. If he got Texas, he'd win the election. But he knew that LBJ would tell it like it is. Like if he said he was wrong, he was wrong. He still didn't know if he could trust LBJ. He could trust his brother.
Well, and that's, like I said, it comes back to what I was saying earlier, is you have to surround yourself with people, not kiss asses, but you have to surround yourself with people who will tell you the truth, but at the same time support you.
Oh, yeah.
In your decisions. And of course, if you have elements, and again, we're not just talking harsh feelings here, we're talking about people who are deeply entrenched in power and have held that power either politically or militarily for decades.
For a long time.
And when you start getting into that kind of stuff,
when you start saying, no, we're not going to do it that way anymore, and you're messing with the status quo, and that's when things start to get fishy. And again, we're kind of going into this with a blank mindset. We're trying to research this as we go, and what we're going to interpret is what we come to. Right. And again, but we do need help with this. What's your theories on this? What you think of this? What you think of that? We can't do this alone. But no, it's just interesting. The more that you read about his presidency, the more layers come back. And again, I mean, he was, I think LBJ said it. He was the best looking politician you'd ever seen before.
Red-headed Irishman.
He sold people hope, not false hope. I don't think.
No.
I think he had ambitions. And again, sadly, we'll never know what would have been like in his second term. And a lot of presidents' second terms are not as good as the first one. They come in there with great ideas. You have both sides of the government that are on your side. You can get legislation passed. Then you hit that wall the second time.
Yeah.
So would he get stonewalled again the second time? I mean, would he have stayed in Vietnam? Would he have escalated in Vietnam like LBJ did? Again, we'll never know.
Yeah.
But, it's amazing how he dealt with a lot of that stuff on that first presidency. I mean, again, you've got a country that's going to tear itself apart with civil rights. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which this country had never been so close to nuclear war up until that point. You had the Bay of Pigs debacle. You looked very badly because it was terrible. Whether or not it was a setup to make him look bad, whether it was poorly executed, don't know that. And then you throw Vietnam on top of that. It's like, my goodness, And then you've got to, this is, leading up to the assassination, you've got to start getting ready for re-election.
Yeah.
Would he have even been re-elected?
And you have a lot of elements that should be on your side, that are working against you.
Yeah, it's very, and again, I hate to use that word fascinating because somebody lost their life.
Yes.
And not only somebody lost their life, this was the president of the United States.
Right.
Whether you like the president, any president in your lifetime, whether you liked him, you loved him, nobody wants to see, a president lose his life, a person lose his life in anything. What other side of the fence you're on, nobody wants that.
And I have to say, regarding the Zapruder film, of course, everyone has seen the footage. I understand for historical context, it's necessary, but something within me, it's not only is it tragic, but it's deplorable that
it's tough to watch. And there's footage out there of it's either a senator or a congressman from Pennsylvania that shot himself on camera.
Yeah.
And again, I understand for historical reasons, but it's tough. But
yeah.
And I'm sure we'll brush on the Recruiter film when we get up. Like I said, we're trying to build a timeline here, and we're going to lead up into that and hopefully come to, obviously it's not a clear-cut conclusion, but what maybe we think would happen. And
right.
Again, we need your help. So if you're watching this series, if this intrigues you, if you have information or a theory, share it with us, because
Yeah.
we need our help. We need help.
If there's any kind of resources or anything that you think might be beneficial or anything like that, we could look into.
Yes, if you think we're off base on something and we need to go back, if we're heading in the wrong direction, just let us know. We're in this together.
Absolutely.
Like I said, if you're watching this series, we're in this together. Help us out. So, like I said, be on the lookout for more episodes. And as always, search for the truth.
Take care.
So this accident list is very peculiar because anybody that was on this list was either going to or had testified that conflicted against this Warren Commission. It's very fascinating.
Something to look at some of these, and it's people lose their lives here, but fascinating to look at single car accidents, accidental overdoses, and things of that nature. And we all know that there are elements always in play, even today and throughout history. Sometimes accidents aren't just.
There's more than see the eye.
Yeah.
There's something going on there. We need to figure that out.